This morning I was talking to a couple of my friends about how I want to try to stress out less. Um, it's very simple in concept, in theory, but the application of it is not so much. I'm beginning to believe that stress is like a trauma response. It's like a reaction to most things that we don't like in our lives, that we disagree with, that uh, trigger us, so to speak. And the reason I want to say that is because when I hear something that I don't like, or when I hear something that I feel like I have to do, like maybe somebody gives me an assignment at work with a due date, a deadline, or like when I was in school, a professor would tell me that this essay had to be like maybe 10 pages long and that those 10 pages were due next Tuesday, right? And I don't the stress comes from not wanting to be told what to do. Like it takes the joy out of doing the thing. Like anything that we do in our lives, I don't think that any of us want to be told what to do. We want to have some sense of control in those things, and we want to be able to put our own hearts, our own love and feelings into those projects so that they don't feel forced. If I wanted to if I wanted somebody to tell me what to do, I think I would. I think I'd probably join the military. No offense, but I have. I learned at a very young age that I'm a little bit more on the artistic side, and definitely a little bit more emotional. And because of that, I have to pay more attention to how I feel in the moment. Do I actually want to be doing this thing? Is it bringing me a sense of joy or gratification or a sense of completion in this activity? And if it's not, then I need to abandon that project and start on something that is actually fulfilling my heart. But stress is, I learned at a very young age in school that there's a difference between stress and anxiety. And anxiety, from what I learned from a professor that I was very fond of, he explained it that anxiety is internal, while stress is the physical manifestation of anxiety. So when somebody says that they're stressed out, um, more often than not, what they actually mean is that they're very anxious about something, but stress is what they feel externally in comparison to the anxiety that they feel internally. So when we can't handle a thought and the thought forces us to overthink, go around and around in circles, as Alan Watts would say, the only thing you're thinking about is thoughts. So you're not really getting anywhere. What that ends up happening and doing is that we run around in circles thinking of every possible outcome. This is for the overthinkers in the world, right? It's like the one thing that we do is we can think of every possible outcome, every way that this could go bad, every way that this could go wrong. But the problem with it is that we get stuck in those moments and we don't ever really act as often as we should. Now, the few times that we do act, I feel like we can be very successful because when we have a really good idea and we act upon that idea, it actually leads to a very beautiful creation, like a beautiful project. So in school, if you remember, you would probably produce a massive amount of good ideas in group projects, and maybe you weren't necessarily the best at executing those projects. Maybe some person was better at drawing. Maybe another person's handwriting was nicer. So they would be able to execute on your ideas better, but you would be able to kind of be the architect in the background and kind of design the project, right? It's a talent and it's a blessing because it sucks to have so many good ideas and to not always know what to do with them. So what ends up happening is we freeze up and we start tensing certain muscles in our body. We start tensing our jaw, our head starts to maybe feel a little bit stressed, and then suddenly blood pressure rises, maybe your heart rate increases, and all of these things are physical manifestations of something that hasn't even happened yet. It's all stuck in our heads, but because we don't want to mess it up, we try our best to think our way through it so that by the time that it does appear in physical manifestation, it doesn't look bad. But what we don't get as overthinkers, what we don't understand is that while we spend all that time overthinking this one thing, the person who is more busy doing things is learning more through the process of creation and destruction and mess ups and successes, and they're actually collecting more experience and getting more exposure in their work. So I like to think of it often as like Vincent van Gogh, right? Like Vincent van Gogh, he was a little bit older, like mid ages, like I think he was in his late 20s, I forget, don't quote me, but he only spent 2 to 3 years painting. That's when he started painting. He decided to pick up a paintbrush, pick up an easel, and just paint what he saw. And that's kind of what made him famous, is every day he would paint what he saw. And if I'm not mistaken, the amount of paintings that he produced, I think if you do the math, he was producing one painting like every 2 to 3 days over the course of like 2 years. And those paintings, he did them so often, not all of them were like great. You don't know every single Vincent van Gogh paintings, but the ones that you saw, like the bangers, like they're well known all around the world. Like almost you'd have to search far and wide to find a single person who hasn't seen Starry Night or the Vase of Sunflowers, right? Or the Self-Portrait of Vincent van Gogh. Like those are very famous paintings, and they only grew in exposure because of the mass production of one guy. But it's sad to say that if we ever got the chance to meet Vincent van Gogh, we would probably find that he was also an overthinker. Probably a majority of his life was spent thinking so much about stuff, and then when he actually got to the point where he started painting, it was like a buildup of all the thoughts that he had over such a long time, and he finally put it to pen. And that's where the beauty of his genius was finally shown. And that's what I think is really sad, is that the stress that we feel, it is so easily defeated by action, because the action of keeping your hands busy shuts your mind up, or at minimum it focuses it so that you can aim it in a certain direction. Sports, this is why sports are such a lovely thing, because maybe you're thinking about all these different things, but while you're doing a sport, your only concern, like in tennis, is to get the ball over the net. Or in football is to run down the field and catch the ball, or throw the ball to the person who's trying to receive it. These are very inline actions, like get something or yourself from point A to point B. It simplifies so many things. You don't think about how to throw the ball, you don't think about how to run. They just produce themselves. And then they get better over time, because the more you do it, the better you get. The more you reproduce the action, the more you improve. So like with Vincent van Gogh's paintings, the more he painted, the better he got. And that's the same with most artists. But if you don't ever take an action, you get stuck in the thought. So I go back to the stress and the anxiety. The anxiety, I like to believe, is us thinking about all the things that could or could not happen. But to simplify it, it is our physical being in the present and our brain being in the future. So your brain and your body can't be in two places at one time. It'll tear the spirit apart. So when your brain is in the future but your body's in the present, it creates a stress on the body. because you cannot separate those two things. The way that you find peace is to maintain your mind and your body in the same time. I am sitting in a chair, I am talking into a microphone, I am playing a video game, and that is all. That's all that's necessary. But if you don't remind yourself of what you're currently doing and you start becoming judgmental of your surroundings, like, I could clean my room, I should be doing something, I'm out of shape, I should be eating healthier, I should be doing my homework. The judgment that you pass upon inanimate objects and your surroundings and yourself creates another world in your head where you start to visualize how things should be or could be. And you're now living in an altered state of consciousness where you're creating an entire world that doesn't even exist. I have this problem, and that's why I know, like, because I will catch myself sitting in a chair sometimes thinking about all the way that this situation could possibly go wrong. And in the meantime, there are other people doing similar things to me, and they're just skipping all that and making and making and making. And what they find is more success because they're doing the trial and error through the creation project, through the system of creation. And they're learning what actually is the mistake through trial and error instead of worrying about what a mistake might be. I told myself this year I wanted to stress less. It really starts to suck when people at work or friends or family start to notice that you are stressed. Oh, you worry too much, they say. You stress out too much. You're gonna go bald. You're gonna have gray hairs. It's like, you shouldn't worry so much. You're gonna give yourself a freaking ulcer. You're gonna give yourself a stroke. Like, these are all comments I feel like I've heard in the last 6 months, and they're really annoying. But at the same time, I have to take them in because these people, they're trying to tell me something, and it's a really hard lesson to learn because I could sit around and be offended by it, but I'm actually kind of concerned why so many people are saying the same thing, and it makes me sad because I don't want to worry that much. Like, I don't want it to be so bad that people are literally seeing what I thought was only in my head. Like, I really thought at some point that I was actually pretty good at compartmentalizing like all of the negative thoughts in my head, but it turns out people can see it more than I thought. And that's the stress. That's the physical manifestation when they see me rubbing my head or like rubbing my eyes or trying to massage the side of my neck or something. It's like people are seeing me physically unsettled because and this is the funniest part. I can't even say because they don't even know why. They don't know all these worlds that I'm building in my head. How could they? They're in my head. So it's just me in here. And it's like, if I don't figure this out, there's nobody else to blame. So I have to just make that conscious decision to worry less, that when something comes up and it does trigger me, like a trauma response, like I was saying before, like, I don't necessarily need to know why it's bothering me in order to make the decision that I don't want it to bother me. I can consciously make that decision and say, I'm going to let this go. I see it. I understand that there's very little that I can do about it, but I'm going to let it go. I have to let it go. I can't afford to bring this home with me. I can't afford to allow this to affect my work or my athletics. And it's like, I want to be peaceful, because if you manage to be peaceful, that's where success is found. That is, peacefulness is found in your ability to be present. And you can't be present if you're anxious, because when you're anxious, you are not here. You're literally not here in your mind. So if that is the solution, then maybe overthinking is not necessarily a talent, but maybe it's like a an ability that just needs to be harnessed, right? I think all of us have it to some degree, but I think we can all practice being better.